事了。
我们快点赶回学院救小亚老师。
怎么日月的军队会出现在史莱克？
史莱克全城做好战争准备。
难道
他既敢来，我们就敢打。
传令。
霍雨浩，
开始吧。
Hey everyone! In Soul Land 2 episode 160, we are going to see something absolutely massive. Juzi doesn't just send a few soldiers, she marches a million-strong army and 20 titled Doluos straight to Shrek Academy's doorstep, and the trap she sets is so perfectly crafted that even Huoyu Hao is left speechless with admiration. But that's not all. Someone long thought lost, someone the Tang sect has been quietly mourning for years, is finally going to get their moment. And the entity that makes it possible? Let's just say the Blue Silver Emperor doesn't stay hidden in the forest forever. And remember, this is based on the novel, so when the official Donghua adapts this part, it may not be 100% similar. This video is made for those curious about what's coming next, based on the novel and my narration, which I've tried to make as close to the predicted official episode as possible. If you enjoy this, a like and subscribe would mean the world. We're pushing toward 2,000 subscribers and every single one counts. Alright, without further delay, let's get into it. The Blue Silver Emperor appears, Juzi's million-strong army marches on Shrek. And just like that, everything changed. After Huoyu Hao successfully retrieved the Blue Silver Emperor, the war between the Sun Moon Empire and the Heavenly Soul Empire came to a devastating close, and with it, the entire balance of the continent shifted. The Giju, the grand strategic landscape that had kept the Dolua continent in a fragile peace, was now crumbling at its foundations. The Sun Moon Empire stood on the edge of total domination, and every remaining kingdom knew it. But even as the army rested and reorganized, preparing for the next phase of their campaign to unify the continent under one banner, something unexpected shattered the calm at the top. News arrived at the front lines, news of a secret attack on Mingdu itself. The imperial heartland had been struck. The very core of the Sun Moon Empire had been thrown into an unknown crisis, and no one had seen it coming. For Juzi, the empress and god of war who commanded a million soldiers, this was not just a military emergency. It was personal. Because the only clue, the one name whispered through intelligence reports, was a name that stirred something deep and complicated inside her, Huoyu Hao. And here is where you see the other side of Juzi, the side buried beneath layers of armor, ambition, and iron discipline. Because when she heard that name, she wasn't shocked. She wasn't furious. Instead, something else rose within her, a quiet, aching understanding. She recognized the brilliance of the plan immediately, the sheer ingenuity of it, and rather than rage, what surged through her was a complex, bittersweet mix of tenderness and anticipation. She saw him in every stroke of the strategy. That was Huoyu Hao, always finding the angle no one else could see. And the truth is, Juzi had changed. After everything she had endured, especially the tragedy of her son's abduction, the woman who once burned with ambition and hunger for power had been quietly hollowed out in the places that used to ache for glory. She had grown indifferent to fame, indifferent to conquest. The things that once drove her forward no longer held the same weight. What remained, buried deep within her heart like an ember that refused to die, was her bond with Huoyu Hao. He had become her warmth in the middle of all the cold intrigue and endless war. He was her one constant, her ice, in the most poetic and painful sense of the word. But the war did not pause for feelings. The Sun Moon Empire's army had completed its rest and reorganization, and Juzi formally convened a full military command meeting. Every major figure in the Empire's military hierarchy was present, and let me be clear, this was an absolutely staggering gathering of power. 6 Level 9 Soul Masters anchored the room, surrounded by over 20 titled Doluos and Level 9 Soul Masters from across the military's elite structure. The commanders and deputy commanders of the 4 Guardian Hand Soul Master regiments were there. The commanders of every regular Soul Master regiment were there. Commanders of legions and divisions, the entire top leadership of the Sun Moon Empire, assembled in one place, preparing to move as one unstoppable force. The command foundation for what came next was now firmly set. At that meeting, Juzi issued the formal order to advance. The combat plan against Shrek City was finalized and put into motion. She dispatched the 1st, 3rd, and 5th Legions as the primary strike force, flanked by the elite Evil Eye and Terror Claw Soul Master regiments, ordering them to advance to within 100 miles of Shrek City and form a pincer encirclement. Their orders were to establish fortified camps, rapidly construct complete Soul Guidance defensive positions, and lock the entire area into a combat-ready posture, capable of launching a full assault at any moment. The rest of the massive army followed closely behind, arrayed in formation and standing by for further orders. This decision stunned Zhongli Wu. He had pushed for an attack on Shrek City multiple times before, only to be shut down by Juzi each time. Now, she was the one giving the order, and it aligned perfectly with his deepest, most obsessive wish, the annihilation of Shrek Academy. So for once, Zhongli had no objections. Not a single one. The military order was given, and the Sun Moon Empire's forces poured out in full strength. 1 million soldiers, elite regiments, and titled Dolua commanders, all advancing toward Shrek City in a suffocating, unstoppable tide. By evening, the operation was already complete. A massive semi-encirclement had been established 100 miles out, tightly sealing off the outer perimeter of Shrek City from every angle. Shrek's gates remained shut. The city stayed silent. And between the two sides, an invisible, crushing tension settled over the entire battlefield like a storm that hadn't broken yet. Then, as night fell, the standoff took a dramatic and terrifying turn. The Sun Moon Empire deployed its high-altitude soul-guided flame technology, and the sky above Shrek City lit up with an unmistakable message. Lights and shadows formed massive, unmistakable words hanging over the city for all to see. Hand over Huiyuhao within 10 days, or the entire city would be slaughtered. It was not a request. It was not a warning. It was an ultimatum delivered with the full weight of a million-strong army behind it. And it was at this exact moment that Huiyuhao and Tang Wutong arrived. They had just returned, and they witnessed this scene with their own eyes. The looming encirclement, the blazing words in the night sky, the suffocating military pressure bearing down on the city that had been their home. The shock of it hit them both immediately and deeply. But Huiyuhao didn't freeze. He acted. Using their soul skills, he led Tang Wutong and the Blue-Silver Emperor, carefully and stealthily, into Shrek City without drawing attention. He didn't go to the academy first. Instead, he returned to the Tang sect, where he gathered the Tang sect's high-ranking members and began setting things in order. He made proper arrangements for the Blue-Silver Emperor's residence and informed everyone of his plan. After assessing the full situation at the academy, he would begin Tangya's treatment and work to stabilize the Tang sect internally. Once that was communicated, Huiyuhao, Bei Bei, and Tang Wutong made their move and rushed toward Shrek Academy. On the way there, they crossed paths with students on duty, and what those students told them hit like a physical blow. The Heavenly Soul Empire had been destroyed. Completely. All three of them were struck with profound shock. Because they understood what this meant far beyond the political headlines. The destruction of the Heavenly Soul Empire had wiped out the last strategic buffer standing between Shrek City and the Sun Moon Empire. There was nothing between them now. And beyond that, it marked a decisive step in the Sun Moon Empire's march toward total continental unification. The original powers of the Dolua continent were now in an extraordinarily passive, deeply vulnerable position. The three of them moved quickly and landed on Sea God Island, entering the Sea God Pavilion to find all the elders already gathered. The weight in that room was immense. The survivors of the Heavenly Soul Empire, people who had watched their country die, carried their grief visibly. Princess Vina was present, and she looked haggard, hollowed out by sorrow and loss. The destruction of an entire nation hung in the air of that chamber like smoke that wouldn't clear. But Elder Xian, in that moment of overwhelming crisis, showed exactly why he was who he was. He didn't rush to defensive strategy. He didn't panic. Instead, calm and composed, he first turned to Huiyuhao and asked him to recount everything, every detail of their infiltration into the Sun Moon Empire. Huiyuhao told it honestly. The surprise attack on Mingdu, the bombing of the palace, the sequence of operations they had carried out, everything, except for the core secret of his undead demiplane, which he kept carefully concealed. When the elders heard the full scope of what Huiyuhao's group had pulled off in the very heart of the Sun Moon Empire, a wave of shock moved through the room, and for just a moment, the suffocating tension of the battle situation lifted, even slightly. Then the real work began. Inside the Sea God Pavilion Council Hall, everyone sat down for a deep, thorough analysis of what they were facing: the Sun Moon Empire's advance on the city, the 10-day deadline, the demand for Huiyuhao's handover. Elder Xian led the initial analysis, laying out the connection clearly. Huiyuhao's group's surprise attack on Mingdu, the devastating damage done to the Imperial Palace, had deeply alarmed the Sun Moon Empire's royal family and caused them to suspect Huiyuhao directly. That suspicion had translated into this military deployment and the ultimatum. But behind this seemingly straightforward military pressure, Elder Xian warned, lay a tactical layout far deeper than it appeared on the surface. And that realization left everyone in the pavilion sinking into heavy, troubled thought. It was Huiyuhao who broke through first. Drawing on his own intimate knowledge of the situation and, most critically, his personal history with Zhu Zi, he was the first to overturn the group's initial assumptions. He pointed out something crucial. The Sun Moon Empire knew he wasn't at Shrek Academy when they issued the ultimatum. They knew. And yet they still set a 10-day deadline. That wasn't the logic of a force simply looking to launch an attack. That wasn't the logic of a provocation looking for an excuse. There was something else at work here entirely. And then Huiyuhao revealed what he knew about Zhu Zi, information that no one else in that room could have offered. He told them that Zhu Zi had studied alongside him, that she was deeply versed in military strategy, and that she had been a central architect in the destruction of the Heavenly Soul Empire. He told them what he knew to be true from his years of knowing her: Zhu Zi never made a pointless move in war. Every action she took carried a hidden layer, a deeper design. This troop deployment, this public ultimatum, it was not what it looked like. It couldn't be. And as the analysis continued and the layers were peeled back, Zhu Zi's open scheme, her trap disguised as a straightforward ultimatum, began to surface. By using Hui Yuhao as the stated pretext, she had marched her army to Shrek's gates while exploiting the one weakness she knew Shrek could not overcome: their pride and their duty. Shrek would never stand by passively while a threat loomed at their doorstep. They would fight. They would gather every force they had to defend. And the moment they did that, the moment word spread that Shrek was mobilizing, the Star Luo and Do Ling empires would feel the pressure too. To protect themselves, they would use the 10-day window to send troops rushing to Shrek's aid. And the moment all those forces converged in one place, Shrek and its allies would be completely locked inside the battle plan Zhu Zi had designed for them. Passive, trapped, and controlled from every direction. The room fell into a difficult silence. Every option they reached for seemed to close off before they could grasp it. Someone suggested leveraging the support of the Star Do Great Forest and the Spirit Pagoda, but Elder Xian shut that down firmly. The spirit beasts had watched humanity tear itself apart in civil war and had been quietly satisfied by the losses on both sides. They would offer no help. Then someone proposed going on the offensive, a direct, proactive confrontation to break the encirclement by force. Hui Yuhao rejected that too, immediately and clearly. The Sun Moon Empire's sole guidance defensive lines were intact, well-preserved, and extremely formidable. A direct assault would bleed them dry with massive casualties and offer almost no realistic chance of victory. They were cornered at every turn. And then Tang Wutong stepped forward with an idea that cut through everything. A proposal so bold and so emotionally precise that it left the entire room stunned. She argued that Zhu Zi's deployment was a smokescreen. That the real key to this entire situation lay not in military force, but in something far more human. She revealed what she understood about Zhu Zi's feelings for Hui Yuhao, the deeply personal connection that still existed beneath all that armor and imperial authority. And based on that, Tang Wudong made her case. Zhu Zi would not order a massacre or a siege if she knew Hui Yuhao was inside Shrek City. She simply wouldn't. Her feelings wouldn't allow it, no matter what political pressures surrounded her. So Tang Wutong's proposal was this: Shrek should remain still. Do not reach out to the Star Luo or Do Ling empires for reinforcements. Solidify the city's own defenses from within, and simply allow Hui Yuhao to appear, to confirm his presence inside Shrek City, and use that single act to dissolve the entire siege crisis. The silence that followed those words was absolute. The elders could barely process it. The idea that the Empress and God of War, the woman commanding 1 million soldiers, might allow personal feelings to override military and imperial strategy was something they found almost impossible to believe. But Hui Yuhao had already accepted it in his heart. He knew Zhu Zi. He believed it. Even so, Elder Xian hesitated. The stakes were too high. The foundation of Shrek Academy, centuries of history and legacy, could not rest on a gamble built around one person's emotions. The public skepticism alone made it a dangerous position to hold openly. So Elder Xian chose a compromise. He ordered the entire city into full defensive deployment, with the 3 major Soul Master Corps ordered to establish soul guidance bases throughout the city. At the same time, formal notifications were sent to the Star Luo and Do Ling kingdoms, not requesting troops, but ordering them to guard their borders strictly and be ready to provide reinforcements at a moment's notice if needed. The surviving forces of the Heavenly Soul Empire pledged their full support in the city's defense. The plan was set. The preparations began. When the meeting finally concluded late into the night and Bei Bei walked out of the Sea God Pavilion, he saw it with perfect clarity. Everything, every move, every option, every response, had been anticipated and controlled by Zhu Zi. Shrek Academy had been maneuvered into a completely passive position, and there was no clean way out. The discussion had laid it bare. They were entangled, cornered, and reacting, not leading. And Hui Yuhao felt it more acutely than anyone. Standing in the weight of that realization, he didn't deflect or make excuses. He admitted it openly and painfully. Their return from the Sun Moon Empire had been, strategically speaking, a mistake. The entire purpose of infiltrating Mingdu and striking at the Empire's heart had been to contain the frontline army, to dismantle the enemy's offensive momentum before it could be directed at Shrek. But instead, the Blue-Silver Emperor appears, Tanya's martial soul reawakens. But the bitter truth was now impossible to deny. Zhu Zi's open strategy, her brilliantly constructed trap disguised as a military ultimatum, had done exactly what it was designed to do. It had firmly restrained Shrek Academy, rendering them completely unable to strike back into the Sun Moon Empire's homeland. Every attempt to contain the situation, every plan to control the momentum of the war, had collapsed. The strategic blueprint they had risked everything to execute had failed entirely. And Hui Yuhao, standing in the wreckage of that realization, did something that revealed the depth of his character. He genuinely, sincerely admired her. He admired Zhu Zi's tactical brilliance, not with bitterness, but with the honest recognition of someone who understood strategy well enough to know when he had been outplayed by a master. Because what Zhu Zi had done was almost elegant in its cruelty. Rather than throwing her million-strong army against the heavily fortified walls of Shrek City in a direct assault, she had used Hui Yuhao himself as the instrument of pressure. By making him the pretext, she had forced Shrek into a position where they had no choice but to proactively strengthen their own defenses and reach out for external support, all to protect a foundation built over thousands of years of history. This kind of overt strategy, using the weight of overwhelming force to intimidate rather than strike, was almost impossible to counter. Because no one, not Elder Xian, not any of the elders, not any of the commanders, could afford to gamble with the safety of the academy. And Zhu Zi had known that. She had counted on it. Shrek was completely on the defensive, and she had put them there without firing a single shot. Tang Wutong, for her part, was drowning in guilt. She felt that her earlier words, her proposal about Zhu Zi's feelings for Hui Yuhao, had interfered with the room's decision-making at a critical moment, and the weight of that sat heavily on her. But Hui Yuhao was calm. He was forgiving, completely and genuinely. He knew, with quiet clarity, that even if he had personally stepped forward and pleaded for a different course, it wouldn't have changed anything. When the stakes involved the Academy's centuries-old foundation, the elders were always going to choose stability. That was simply who they were and what they were sworn to protect. The situation was precarious, the walls were closing in, and it was Bei Bei who stepped into that silence and pushed them forward, suggesting, practically and urgently, that they needed to find a way out of the impasse rather than remaining frozen in regret. And that was what Hui Yuhao needed. He gathered his thoughts quickly, sharpened his focus, and finalized a new response plan on the spot. His judgment, arrived at through careful analysis, was this: Zhu Zi's true target was not Shrek Academy. It never had been. The advance on Shrek was a smokescreen, a grand, elaborate distraction. Her real objective was the weakest link in the continent's remaining power structure, the Dou Ling Empire. With that clarity locked in, Hui Yuhao began assigning tasks with precision. Tang Wutong was to return to the academy, gather intelligence on the Star Luo Empire's garrison disposition, and make contact with Tianyang Doluo to help stabilize the Dou Ling Empire's defenses before it was too late. Bei Bei was to travel to the Star Luo Empire, find Duke Baihu, and deliver a critical message: persuade both kingdoms not to send their full forces rushing to Shrek's aid. Leave only elite troops on standby. Do not fall into the trap of mass convergence. Do not let Zhu Zi herd them exactly where she wanted them. But even as the plan took shape, Hui Yuhao felt something darker pressing down on him from beneath all the strategic thinking. He felt powerless. Genuinely, deeply powerless. Everything he had done, the infiltration of Mingdu, the bombing of the palace, the entire high-risk operation carried out in the heart of the Sun Moon Empire, had yielded minimal results against the larger war. Zhu Zi's ruthless tactical mind and her ability to control the battlefield from a position of overwhelming strength had turned every move he made into something she could absorb, redirect, and use against him. He stood in the middle of a war he could not change, and the weight of that realization pressed down on him with full force. And then Tang Wutong reached him. Not with strategy. Not with analysis. With something simpler and far more powerful. She reminded him of who he was and what he carried. She pointed out that Hui Yuhao, as Shrek Academy's only ultimate solo fighter, uniquely gifted with twin martial souls and the irreplaceable advantage of the undead demiplane, was never truly fighting alone. He had the Tang sect. He had Shrek. He had people who stood behind him with everything they had. But more than any of that, she said what needed to be said: only by becoming extraordinarily strong, by pushing far beyond where he currently stood, could he turn the tide of a war that no amount of clever maneuvering seemed able to shift. Only overwhelming personal power could achieve what strategy alone could not. Those words cut through. And then, as if rising from somewhere even deeper, his mother's dying words came back to him, surfacing from memory with a clarity and weight that landed like a revelation. Everything crystallized in that moment. Hui Yuhao finally, completely understood the key to breaking out of this deadlock. Against Zhu Zi's top-tier open strategies, ordinary tactics were useless. Clever plans were not enough. Maneuvering within the existing limits of his strength was not enough. The only answer, the only real answer, was to shatter those limits entirely. To grow beyond what he currently was. To become someone whose sheer force of power made the impossible suddenly possible. Only through that kind of overwhelming strength could he achieve the kind of unexpected, decisive victory that could actually change the course of events on a continental scale. And what tormented her most was not the physical weakness. It was the guilt. The quiet, crushing desolation of watching the Tang sect grow and flourish under the efforts of everyone around her, everyone she had helped raise, everyone she had believed in, while she, the sect leader, sat on the sidelines powerless to contribute. She had watched them fight and bleed and build something extraordinary, and she could do nothing but watch. That helplessness had eaten at her in ways that no medicine could touch. When word reached her that Hui Yuhao had actually returned with the legendary Blue-Silver Emperor, an entity she had perhaps stopped truly believing would ever be found, something inside her cracked open. She, who had remained so still and dormant for so long, was suddenly overwhelmed with grief and longing. She waited, concealing the storm of excitement and nervousness churning within her, clutching at her own clothing with trembling hands, her eyes full of a desperate, aching hope for rebirth. And then Hui Yuhao walked into the hall. He came with his whole heart set on one purpose, to heal the person who had given him a home and a future when he had nothing. Bei Bei stood silently nearby, and anyone who looked at him could see his eyes reddening. Because Bei Bei had been the one who had stayed. Year after year, through all the campaigns and crises and victories, he had been at Tangya's side, watching the woman he loved suffer in quiet melancholy, unable to truly reach her, unable to fix what was broken. His torment had always been the quietest, and because of that, perhaps the deepest. The moment Tangya saw Hui Yuhao, everything she had held in for so long broke through the surface. She burst into tears and blurted out her gratitude through the emotion she could no longer contain. But Hui Yuhao stopped her there, not coldly, but with the full warmth of genuine feeling. He told her it was he who owed gratitude, that without Tangya and Bei Bei taking him in and sheltering him when he had nowhere to go, he would not be who he was today. He would not have become anything. And he said it clearly, he was not going to fail her expectations. The treatment would begin now. Then, into that deeply charged moment, the Blue-Silver Emperor stepped into the hall in human form, and the room shifted entirely. As the king of the Blue-Silver Grass clan, he recognized Tang Ya's lineage immediately. With calm precision, he detected the faint but unmistakably pure source of blue-silver essence still alive within Tang Ya's body beneath all the damage and dormancy. And he agreed to help. Before that agreement was given full form, Hui Yuhao took a moment to clear the air, explaining honestly to the Blue-Silver Emperor that Bei Bei had always lived by his principles, that he had never actively hunted soul beasts, and that there was no cause for concern or mistrust between them. Whatever residual hesitation the Blue-Silver Emperor might have carried was completely set aside. With that settled, the Blue-Silver Emperor raised his hand and condensed a section of crystalline natal vine. Pure, translucent, luminous. This was the key treasure, the instrument through which Tang Ya's damaged martial soul could be awakened. The group moved together into a quiet room, where Bei Bei stood watch over the healing ritual that would determine everything Tang Ya had left to hope for. The ritual began. The Blue-Silver Emperor released a gentle, soft blue light that spread over Tang Ya and enveloped her completely, and in an instant, something happened that no soul skill or rare treasure had ever managed to achieve across all the years of her illness. The years of accumulated mental and physical anxiety, the tension that had lived so long in her body and mind, dissolved. She became calm. Truly, peacefully calm. For perhaps the first time in years. Hui Yuhao locked his focus and channeled his profound spiritual power deep into the natal vines, and the response was immediate and spectacular. A burst of blue light erupted from the vines, and they transformed into countless tiny, drifting specks of radiance. Using the full depth of his exceptional mental strength, Hui Yuhao guided each of those specks with meticulous care, directing the light to diffuse evenly and seep into Tang Ya's body through her pores and breath, layer by layer, reaching inward, gently, persistently, awakening the long-dormant essence of her martial soul from wherever it had retreated deep within her. But healing is never clean or easy when the wound runs this deep. As the surge of power began to rise within her, power that Tang Ya had been waiting years to feel again, she couldn't help herself. The longing overwhelmed the discipline. She reached for it too eagerly, trying to grasp and control the energy before it was ready to be controlled. The imbalance hit immediately. The energy inside her body began to destabilize and spiral, and in that critical, terrifying moment, the entire healing effort teetered on the edge of ruin. The Blue-Silver Emperor moved without hesitation. Thousands of vines erupted from him and wrapped around Tang Ya, holding her steady, anchoring her, and through those vines he poured the pure, unmistakable aura of the Blue-Silver royal bloodline directly into her, using the authority of her own lineage to stabilize what her eagerness had nearly shattered. He reversed the crisis through sheer force of bloodline resonance, and the spiral of chaos was brought back under control. And then, it happened. Tang Ya's dantian lit up. A deep, primordial blue light, the kind that had not been seen within her in years, blazed back into existence. The Blue-Silver Grass martial soul, broken and buried and mourned for so long, was alive again. Fully, completely, beautifully alive. Stable soul power fluctuations began to emerge within her body. slow at first, then steady, then strong. The healing was complete. The Blue-Silver Emperor spoke then with open honesty about what came next. He told them that Tangya, as the bearer of the orthodox bloodline of the Blue-Silver royal clan, was the most suitable host that existed for him. Once she broke through the 90th level, a true merging could take place, a coexistence that would bring mutual success to them both. This was not just recovery. This was the beginning of something far greater than what Tangya had lost. And the transformation was immediate and total. Tangya completely overcame everything: years of illness, years of inner demons, years of guilt and grief and quiet despair. Her damaged martial soul was not partially restored. It was fully revived. Her 8-ring soul master foundation, the cultivation she had lost, came flooding back in its entirety. Her strength rebounded rapidly, climbing with momentum that had clearly been waiting beneath the surface for the moment it could finally breathe again. Tangya was no longer the pale, fragile sect leader watching from the sidelines. She was back. Fully back. A top combatant of the Tang sect, standing once again where she was always meant to stand. The gloom that had hung over all of them broke apart. Everyone in that room exhaled, and they regained their spirits in a way that felt almost physical, like a weight lifting from the air itself. But Bei Bei, even in that moment of relief and joy, was already turning back toward duty. He set his worries for Tangya aside, not because they were gone, but because he trusted the people around her, and prepared to leave. He bid farewell to everyone and set off toward the Star Luo Empire, carrying the mission Huoyu Hao had given him. Before he left, he entrusted Tangya's protection to Jiang Nannan and Xiao Xiao, the people he knew would stand beside her without question. The war was still out there. The million-strong army was still encircling the city. Zhu Zi's trap was still set. But something had shifted inside the walls of the Tang sect tonight. A light that had nearly gone out had been rekindled, and Huoyu Hao, watching it burn, made a silent promise to the night. He would go into seclusion. He would push past every limit. And when he emerged, the continent would feel the difference.